I want to actually start by thanking Brand Innovators, because I think this is sort of the last session of the year. I'm not sure for all your programming, but certainly for anything that I'm involved in. And it's just been a wonderful year of content and just great opportunities to, raise the conversations that we should be having in our industry and profile just some incredible people. So I just wanted to start off by thanking you for that, and then move it over to Tia, the wonderful person that I get to have a conversation with today, and tee that up in terms of, getting your perspective on the predictions and what we see ahead for 2022. Obviously some big topic areas when we look into what's changing in leadership, in marketing and innovation, and of course in commerce, something that's near and dear to both of our focus today. But before I get into that, Tia, let me try to do justice to who you are and your background. So, as Andrea said, I'm joined by Tia Cummings. I think your name is Tia Cummings Webster, your full name, or maybe it's the other way around. But incredible background. You're Atlanta-based, and have been an award-winning marketer. 15 years of experience across a few different sectors, but mostly for Fortune 500 companies like United Technologies, Johnson & Johnson, L'Oreal, Kellogg's, and the Intercontinental Hospital Group or Hotels Group, prior to joining Square, which is what brings us to the conversation today. Tia attended Hampton University as president scholar and earned a BS in chemical engineering. We're going to find out how that is related to the world that you live in today. And after that, she got an MBA from the Krannert School of Management at Purdue University, where she was a business opportunity program fellow. So quite inspiring background, Tia, and just preparing for this, listening to your viewpoints on these different topics was super interesting, and so much that I want to learn more about, and I'm sure now a chance for everybody to hear some of your perspectives. So let's get first into the topic of leadership. The last, really more than a year, I guess, if we're counting, it's been about 18 months since the beginning of the pandemic anyway. And already as we looked at a new decade and reaching 2020, we were thinking that there would be some types of leadership transformation, just, looking at the beginning of a new decade and the things that were changing in the world and in our businesses, not obviously foreshadowing what was about to come. And now, of course, we've had these dramatic forces at play and at work, literally changing how we work with our own organizations, with the other companies that we serve, and with the consumers that we serve. So it's really tested all of us as leaders. And you have a reputation of being an incredible leader of teams, of business, and the businesses that you serve. So I would love for you to get into that first. Like, what have you learned during this time? And what does that give you in terms of insight into what has to continue to change? And how are you thinking about leading differently as you go into 2022?
Yeah, I mean, right. So much has changed the last 2 years. And, I've always considered myself an empathetic and human-centered leader, but I think those skills have become even more important since COVID. When you think about how drastically people's lives have changed in so many ways, right? Whether it's picking up a job now as a full-time educator as for their kids on top of, their day job, dealing with the separation from family and friends, or even the loss of family and friends, So I think if the last almost 2 years have taught me anything, it's that work is not and should not be the number one priority in people's lives. And so when you approach it from that perspective as a leader, if, hey, work is no longer the most important thing, that really means I've shifted in how I'm leading my teams, right? So now it's all about encouraging them to take care of themselves and their families first, no matter what that means and whatever that looks like for them. I spend a lot more time checking in on my people than I did in the past. Every week, how are you doing? What are you, what can I do to support you? I think I'd always kind of believed that work will work itself out, but I think myself and a lot of other people lost sight of that until COVID kind of really reminded us and forced us to slow down and, think about our priorities in life. And so, I just learned to extend a lot of grace to people, right? Because I know everyone is really just doing the best that they can. And then I think the other thing that's really changed is I spend a lot more time thinking about ways to motivate my team and help them feel connected when we are 100% remote. Um, that is really, really hard. It's a lot easier when you're in an office and engaging with people on a day-to-day basis, but you really got to get creative. People have video conference fatigue. There's only so many Zoom parties, you can do. So, it takes a lot of work to really find new ways to make those things fun and engaging.
Yeah, it strikes me. One of the things that we've been thinking a lot about is when you are operating from home and your schedule is back to back, it ends up creating a very transactional relationship with those that we work with our employees, and even in some ways our clients. And so it's like, how do you develop that emotional engagement or the serendipity and spontaneity that happens, even just that kind of fun connection that takes place when you're physically together? And I think it's super difficult. And even when we start to move more into hybrid workflows, I think it still could be difficult because the time is going to be so scheduled when you're together and so programmed that we're not leaving a lot of breathing room and space. And it's just very hard to create that as a leader. So it's interesting to hear how you're thinking about that and trying to address it.
Yeah, and I don't have the silver bullet. I'm still trying to figure it out, right? I'll be fully transparent, because I'm still getting feedback like, hey, want to feel more connected to the team, want to know what everyone's doing. And so, it's a lot of test and learn, and well, let's try this and let's try this. We'll figure it out. It's something that we'll get used to. But yeah, it's tough.
I think it's also interesting when you think about, like, we've talked the idea of customer centricity for so long. And I think we're moving into a time in the workforce where it's about employee centricity.
Yeah.
And just like companies who talked client centric or customer centricity and didn't really organize the business around what that meant to deliver against that promise, I think we're finding and facing the same thing right now as businesses. Like, what does it really mean to truly be employee centric and put their needs and the understanding and how we, inform the understanding that we need to deliver against that differently.
Yeah, I mean, the great resignation is real, right? People are realizing they have options and they're really rethinking their life's priorities. And so it does put the onus on us as employers and leaders to make them want to stay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, these are interesting times. We'll have to check back in and see how, we're both on both sides we're doing on that one. So when we think about 2022, obviously the imperative around innovation becomes even more important. I think when you look at this past year, while innovation probably has started in a lot of companies, there's also been a lot of just protection of the main business, a lot of, how do we maintain to sustain and to, sort of survive maybe another day, depending upon what business you're in or the businesses that you work with. I'd love to hear your thoughts there too, on like kind of striking that balance of either protecting the core and then thinking about where future growth is going to come from. How do you convince an organization that it's sort of time to build the confidence around moving to things that are going to drive innovation? How are you all doing that in your organization?
Yeah. So number one, I think innovation has to be a priority. Especially as we're coming out of the pandemic, just so much has changed from the way we work to the way our businesses are run to the way consumers are shopping and engaging with brands. So I think you'd be hard pressed to try to return to business as usual when the usual itself has shifted. And I think that brands and businesses who fail to innovate in their messaging across their products or services, and in their marketing activities are going to be left behind by the ones who are innovating. For Square specifically, we're always looking to meet the needs of our customers, across the globe, so we can help them start, run, grow their businesses, no matter the size, complexity, or industry, right? That's the party line. And we know that since consumer expectations have changed so much because of the pandemic, business owners have to, really tell us what they need to do so that they can better deliver consumers. And in turn, then we can better help those business owners. So what does that look like? We've had to innovate on our product offerings to account for a lot of these new consumer behaviors, like QR code usage for tableside ordering when you're at restaurants. payments through digital wallets or peer-to-peer, and even this, the whole buy now, pay later uh, growth that's happening. So, you know, we also have to innovate in our marketing approach. So, yes, we'll continue to do all of our messaging around our capabilities, our products, all of that functional stuff to educate business owners on how we can help them. But, we're also really leaning more into our brand purpose so that we can connect on an emotional level. We have to remember, and I tell this to my team all the time, people are like, oh, we're marketing to businesses. It's like, we're marketing to people who own businesses. And so we have to remember that, right? And not just think of them in a functional manner. And so when we talk about our purpose being economic empowerment for all, we're really thinking about, okay, how do we bring that to life in new and innovative ways? So, when we say we're empowering all, how do we make sure that we're including all communities, including the underserved, like African Americans and Hispanics, who've historically struggled with access and support to start businesses. So, those are some of the things that we're thinking about in 2022. It's a mix of both product innovation to account for all of these consumer behavior changes, as well as messaging changes to account for the way people are thinking and feeling.
Can you talk a little bit about like the model or methodology that you use for some of that innovation? Is there like a test and learn philosophy and a culture of experimentation that happens? Or is it a bit of like sitting in a room, just knowing instinctually and based on your data what has to be done, and then you kind of go big behind it? How does that work?
It's got to be both, right? There's an art and a science to it. So we absolutely are data driven, right? We love to do research and dig into insights to learn from, our business owners and what they can tell us, digging into the competitive landscape, mounds of research and data. But there's also have to be, you trust your gut, and we like to experiment 100%. We are a culture of test and learn and experimentation. We have budgets set aside so we can do that and say, hey, let's try this. Let's put this out there in a small scale and see how it works. So we are big into doing that to help figure out, okay, what worked, and then we can put more investment and more support behind it. So it's a balance of both, right? I don't think you should lean one way or another 100%. Because data is data, but there's a reason why we do the jobs, right? And you have to allow for that human instinct and that gut as well.
So linking this now to the question before about like sort of the human capital elements of our jobs, do you find that having a strong innovation culture and agenda helps in the dynamic with employees, and sort of there's a bit of an employee payback in terms of how they feel engaged and get excited behind what the company's mission and purpose is?
100%, right? I think that at Square we're very fortunate because of our culture and the way we do business. People like to stay here because they feel they can try new things. They feel it's entrepreneurial. They can test. And if something doesn't work out or, it's okay. It's like, great. Well, we learned something, on to the next. And I think people thrive and really like those types of cultures as opposed to ones where they don't feel they can do that. And so we're lucky, right? We've got a really good stroke of sort of retaining our talent and recruiting new talent. So I definitely think that having that type of culture helps us as it relates to our employee engagement.
And talk a little bit more too about the B2b audience piece that the point you make is a great one. And anyone who's been in B2B marketing knows, like, you have to keep reminding yourself that this is, a human like ourselves on the other side. It's not that different from, a consumer messaging, conversation. The more human actually that you can make it, and the more you can trigger those things that recognize that person in a holistic way, that sort of the better, I think, and more effective the communication is. But are there things that are shifting and changing, whether that's because of the sort of pandemic force that has occurred, or as you just look to 2022, that is different about how you're marketing to that audience nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, business owners always had challenges, right? Starting a business, running a business is not easy. And then you layer onto that with all of the additional challenges that they're now facing because of the pandemic, right? So for example, it was always hard to run a business. It's harder now because a lot of businesses are struggling to find talent, right? There's a lot of for hire signs out there. So how do you help these business owners when the amount of things that they're worried about has doubled or tripled? And we have to keep that in mind, right? So it would be very insensitive of us to sort of, we're going out with all this regular functional messaging and completely, disregarding some of the emotions that they're dealing and the challenges that they're facing. We have to talk about that. We have to acknowledge that. And so I do think that there's been a shift, right? And sort of ensuring that we show up as saying, we understand, owning a business has always been challenging, and now it's more challenging because of all of these new things that COVID has brought on. And we're addressing those challenges too. Right. And so that's why I said innovation is so required, because so much has changed. Like, if we were still just doing business the way we had done before, I don't think we'd be growing the way that we were able to grow throughout the pandemic. So it's a really interesting nuance, especially for someone like me who's, spent most of her career in traditional consumer marketing, to sort of understand that, no, these are people who've got a lot more on their plate. They're responsible for other people's livelihoods, right? They've got employees, and thinking through that. So we really have to, I think, be more sensitive to that and take that human approach.
Really interesting. And I love to see how these things are evolving. So now a topic, obviously, that's core to both of our businesses, commerce. And we have begun to get into this conversation a little bit as you think about like all of the innovation taking place in commerce today. And if you think about that B2b consumer journey, or even the end consumer journey, and how it's shifted in the last year with technology, and our own behaviors have just changed so dramatically. And your business is really at the heart of those solutions, and how you design for that. And you think about the consumer journey has so many touch points. I'm sure if our budgets were endless, we could really try to cover them all, but there's just not enough time or money for that. So how are you prioritizing the commerce evolution, and what is, like, can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek at what are some of the priorities in your 2022 agenda?
Yeah. So, you kind of hit on it, right? Like, this commerce landscape is constantly evolving, and the way that people are shopping, selling, paying, and getting paid changed even more rapidly during the pandemic. And so what we're seeing is that a lot of these changes are here to stay. And, as long as we understand them and understand them better, and any company really that understands these changes are here to stay, they're the ones who are going to reap the benefits, right? So increasing sales, customer engagement, loyalty, all of those things. So for example, when we think about now, because of the pandemic, many people are used to doing their shopping and buying on a variety of different channels, and they really want to see that experience continue. So they could be browsing and buying something online and then going to pick it up in store, or they bought something via text message and then they want to return it in store, or they're booking their hair appointments via social media, or ordering food from an app and then stopping by for curbside pickup while their kids are in the car. So, so much is changing. Square just released our Future of Commerce report on December 8th. So anyone can go look at it. You go to our town square on our website and you can see there's just a wealth of information in there. And so I'll share a few statistics that we're seeing as it relates to omni-channel commerce. For the beauty channel, or the beauty industry specifically, 25% of Gen Z consumers and 27% of Gen X consumers are interested in shopping through chat or text messages. And then 43% of millennials and Gen Z consumers say that they bought products through a text message for beauty or personal care businesses. So just this desire for omni-channel convenience is not just in how they're shopping and buying, but in how they expect to pay. So we're seeing younger consumers really jump onto that buy now, pay later movement. And you can see it in the growth of, this whole space with players like Affirm and Afterpay and Klarna. And then you see these younger consumers are moving to contactless options like peer-to-peer and mobile wallet apps. So, here's another stat from our Future of Commerce report. This one's related to the retail industry. 21% of Gen Z consumers prefer paying through mobile wallet apps. And that's right underneath the 24% within that same age group who prefer traditional card payments. So you're seeing peer-to-peer and mobile wallets are, catching up to people who want to pay with cards. And so when you really think about, how to win in this new landscape, what we're thinking about is we've got to continue offering new ways and more ways for consumers to shop and pay so we can meet those expectations. And so that means, as a provider to businesses who are providing these services to the end consumer, we have to make sure our products are integrated with all these different ways to shop and pay.
It's just phenomenal to think about the evolution that's going on right now. And I guess not surprising. Like if you think about, we've seen the digital natives now come of age, and now we're getting the mobile natives much more with buying power. And it's second nature to them. Like, I just can't think of, when I think about that age group and people that I know, anyone that's really focused on carrying a wallet as much as the phone is just the center of their lives. So how much are you like looking at China and parts of the world like that are so far out ahead and some of these consumer behaviors to get a sense and indication of where your product innovation pipeline needs to be?
Yeah, Square is really focused on, international expansion. We continue to grow and launch around the world. This year we launched in Ireland and France. Next year we'll be launching in additional countries. I can't share just yet, but absolutely, right? What that means is as we're preparing for our international expansion, there's a lot of on the ground work and research that happens to ensure that we've got the right product experiences and product offerings to succeed in those markets.
Yep. The payment elements of the change that's taking place is just phenomenal again. And it's the creativity being applied to it as well, that, there's a convergence of sort of content with the actual commerce and transaction moment as well, which is something that we're focused on, but it just opens up so many possibilities. It's going to be interesting to see in 2022, really how dramatically this space continues to shift and shape.
Absolutely. And I think that we are well set up for success as we continue to grow. And you think about, all the other brands in our portfolio and how we're integrating them across the board. It's going to be really exciting for us.
So we saw purpose emerge this past year as, a very strong focus for companies, whether it was in the sustainability space or just purpose-driven brands, I think with more meaning and more impact and influence than ever before. So I'd love to talk to you and get your perspectives a bit on like what made it different this year that, has compelled brands to think about it differently, to, put money behind it and budget behind it. And are there, companies that you admire that did it, exceedingly well? And you don't have to name companies that didn't, but, ways that you all thought about, like, where are the boundaries and the guardrails to get it right?
Yeah, it's interesting to me, right? I think there are brands who have been in the purpose game for years, all right? And they do a really great job of integrating it into everything they do. Brands like, Procter and Gamble within their portfolio, Ben and Jerry's, REI, Tom's, like awesome. But then what we've seen over the last 2 years is you've got many companies who kind of use the pandemic as an opportunity, to lean into purpose, like 3M and Clorox. And I think that's great too, right? In my last role at Walker & Company, we knew that our target audience of Black men was severely impacted by the pandemic and the fight for racial justice. So we launched several initiatives to support them, all right, including a partnership with Headspace to offer free mental health resources. And it had a huge impact on our business. Square, during the height of pandemic, really focused on how can we support these small businesses and local communities who are going through a tough time, like I mentioned before. And so, we waived all of our software subscription fees and offered, loans so these businesses could stay open. What we know now, right, and what we've been talking a lot about is how customers are going out of their way to shop with brands that align with their values and are making a difference, right? There was some recent research that shows up to 81% of customers will do that. Mm-hmm. And 42% of millennials said they started or grew a relationship with a brand based on its social impact. And so, consumers are really using their buying power to make these companies act. And so what that means is that being purpose-driven is not a temporary thing. It's not just for show. This is here to stay. And so it really needs to be in your brand's DNA if you're going to be successful at creating that loyal community. And if you haven't realized that yet, then you're really behind. And so when we think about how do you do that in 2022, to me, it always starts with understanding your consumer or your customer extremely well, better than anyone else. Know what is it that's impacting them? How can your brand offer these meaningful and relevant solutions that are really going to add value to their lives? And then the other caveat I love to say you have to watch out is like anything else that becomes a trend, and being purpose driven brand is a trend right now. Lots of brands are going to be jumping onto this purpose bandwagon, and you've got to be careful because if it comes across as performative or disingenuous, your customers are going to see right through you, and that's actually going to hurt you. So you mentioned, I'm not going to call out any names of brands who may have done that and how it's come back to hurt them. We all know, we've seen them. But I feel very strongly that, like I said, there were brands who'd been doing this purpose-driven work for years. And now you've had a bunch of brands who jumped on since 2020, which is great. And I think this is not something that's going to just sort of fall off. Even if we come to be beyond COVID one day, if there's no more variants, I still think being purpose-driven is just something that's now inherent because, when you think about this younger generation, they're really, really focused on that. And so I think all brands really need to spend some time thinking about, what is your purpose? What can you uniquely offer to your consumers that are going to add value to their lives? And how do you tie what you stand for to what consumers care about? I just think it's going to be critical. And the brands who, nail that and find ways to do that authentically in everything they do are the brands who are going to win.
Wholeheartedly agree. And I will call out one recent example, which is Chanel Beauty, who launched, kind of a gift set, if you will, over for the holidays. And it became a massive TikTok backlash overnight because the perceived sense of value, and this wasn't even just about purpose driven, but it was just about commercialism and going a bit too far. And doing something, especially over the holidays, it was supposed to be kind of more of a give back to people who are loyal customers, and then ends up not in reality having kind of the real quality and value behind it, which is what the brand stands for in so many elements. It is interesting how quickly now the consumers are going to hold brands accountable. So it is so important to get it right. And, you mentioned a very strong sense of purpose at Square. Was that something that has been there from the beginning, or is that something that has evolved and strengthened and deepened, or was that sort of the sentiment from the very beginning and now it's just been a commitment to keep paying that off?
Yeah, we're fortunate, right? We were a purpose founded brand. When you think about why Square came to be, it was because one of our co-founders was basically selling art, at like festivals, farmers market kind of thing, and had no way to accept credit card payments. And the only way you could do that, back in like 2008, 2009, the only way you could do that is you partner either with a big bank and you pay these expensive fees. And that's just not, sustainable when you're a small business. And so that's why Square was born. It's like, you know what? Everyone should have access, to the economy and be able to, make money and sell and accept payments in all kinds of ways and not be limited because they can't afford it. And so when you're founded on this premise of economic empowerment for all, it's really easy to carry that through. And I think we've done a really great job as a company of staying true to that and really thinking about, okay, how do we continue to bring that to life? So, I get that that's not the case for all companies and all brands. They weren't all founded on a purpose, or at least a purpose that's as powerful and meaningful. But I think if you do some digging, a lot of these companies may find that actually there was a purpose. And how do you make it relevant in 2022?
Yeah, really good point. So I want to invite the audience to join me here if you have questions. Please, if Tia obviously is sitting on a bunch of data and is a wealth of experience. So please feel free to join me in questions. But while you're thinking about them, another one from me is we have this area in WPP called the Institute for Real Growth. And we work with CMOs and others to think about, okay, what does it take? What are the principles that we see the disproportionately companies that are exceeding others in the sort of ability to sustain growth, real true growth in the organization that's done in a principled way, many of the themes that we're talking about here. And when I think about your business and think about just this last several months, as everyone said, COVID has been accelerant. It's accelerated good and it's accelerated bad. And it was usually a trajectory that companies and businesses and sometimes people were on already anyway. And your company has really met in a very fast-paced way so much of what was going to probably come to your business. It's just come to your business in 3 months, maybe more versus 3 years. So that to me is a bit of a real growth, both challenge and opportunity for your business. How have you, modeled yourself for the speed of change and to be able to deliver against sort of the speed at a high performance level and get situated so that you can maintain that?
Yeah, wait, ask that last part again, just to make sure that
So that's, and also, how have you situated the organization so that you can maintain that kind of speed of growth and performance?
Yeah, it's funny. We are a very flat organization and we still operate like a startup in many ways. We're a Fortune 500 company now, but we operate like a startup and we have a startup mentality, right? And I think that's what allows us to move fast. We don't have a lot of layers and levels of approval similar to what I'm used to coming from the CPG. And so that allows us to move fast. We believe good ideas can come from anywhere and anyone has an opportunity to sort of build something, test something, experiment, see what works and keep going. And so I think that comes from the top, right? The top down. And so having that type of culture, I think really sets you up to be able to move fast and innovate and capture that growth. We also are really focused on, insights, understanding the competition, understanding the landscape. When we do these future of reports, it's because we spend a lot of time really trying to understand what's going on in the market so that we have those insights to think through, okay, now what does that mean we need to do? And so, one, being set up to move fast, but then having the right data and insights to help you, propel you to know what to do. I think that combination is what allows us to really be able to sort of, focus on growth.
That's a very good answer. And I'm sure also one that you all have a lot of internal conversations. I was going to say leadership conversations, but to the horizontal organization piece, I'm sure across the company, you're having those kind of conversations all the time to think about how do you manage those trade-offs, if you will. Yep. Okay, so I did get a good audience question on social. And this will be interesting, again, from a B2B and then B2B2C perspective, but what is the role of social for your business? And are you leaning into social platforms in new ways?
Oh, that's such a great question. And it's so funny. We just hired a new, head of social just a couple months ago, actually. And so we're having these discussions now, really thinking about what is the role of social. And I'm talking from an organic side because, from paid, we still use it as a marketing channel, similar to most brands, right? To reach, to provide mass reach. But when we think about how we're using like our social communities, and talking about it, how do we use it to humanize the brand and tell the stories of a lot of these business owners and kind of just showcase the resilience, and the strength of business owners and use it to inspire, right? Inspire others to start businesses. How do we obviously use it for connection and that two-way conversation? How do we use it to potentially educate? We're talking about how our different social channels can all play a different role. We did an IG live last night where we were bringing together, leaders and business owners to kind of talk about the future of what's happening and what's going to happen in 2022. And so I think social it remains a really powerful channel, and especially during the pandemic where we were limited in a lot of our in real life activations that the company used to rely on to connect with a lot of these business owners. And so now we use social as a way to do that and really to engage. And so I think, we're still hammering it out. We're talking about a lot of the new channels. We've been up across on Facebook and Instagram, but now we're really focused on, the future, and there's a lot of conversation around TikTok. Well, how should we be using TikTok and what does that look like? So, I don't have all the answers yet. These are things that we're trying to figure out right now.
Well, thank you for giving us a peek into some of the things that you guys are beginning to figure out. And we'll, again, another topic you'll have to keep us posted on. So I know we only have a couple minutes left, So I want to just thank you, Tia, and also to correct Tia Cummings-Hopkins. I don't know where I got Webster from. I was looking at another thing on my screen. And so Tia, for everybody who's interested in following you, looking you up on LinkedIn, connecting with you, Tia Cummings-Hopkins, it's been an absolute pleasure. And, thank you for your time today, and good luck as you head into 2022, and happy holidays.